Hi, this is a video looking at writing A grade paragraphs for upcoming controlled assessment. This video is on Curly's wife is lonely. So here's the topics we've discussed in class. I've done videos on all of these, all about 5 minutes, so please try and have a look if you can. This one, like I say, is on Curly's wife being lonely. So this is what's going to happen to you if you just talk about plot. You can't get above an E if you just talk about plot and you don't analyse language. So please make sure you do that. So a perfect PE then is point, evidence, explain, which you've done at school. So simple point, give a quote and then explain why you picked that quote and why it proves your point. Then to get an A grade and B grade, what we're going to do is we're going to add a zoom in. So we're going to zoom in on one word or two words in the quote, and then we're going to talk about context in 1930s America. The quote I've picked to show her lonely side is, "Why can't I talk to you? I get lonely. I never get to talk to nobody. I get awful lonely." So the quote's at the top, and my point is Curly's wife is lonely throughout the novella as none of the other men will speak to her. So they don't speak to her as they're scared of losing their jobs and they know she got them into trouble. So in my explanation, I'm just going to show why this quote shows how isolated she is. So remember, the boss doesn't have a wife, there's no women on the ranch, so what is she supposed to do? She needs to speak to someone. However, whoever she tries to speak to just ignores her, probably even including Curly. I imagine she never gets to talk to Curly about anything that she wants to talk about. As we know, all he talks about is who he wants to beat up. So we're going to talk about why that quote shows that. So for example, she repeats lonely, she asks a question, she can't understand why no one can speak to her. So we're just going to explain the quote and just talk about why that shows how lonely she is. Then we're going to zoom in on some words to talk about in the quote. So I'm going to zoom in on the repetition of lonely. She says it twice. We're going to zoom in that she never gets to talk to nobody. And then we're also going to zoom in on the word awful. So we're going to zoom in on awful. So this is basically saying that she gets very, very, very lonely. So this adjective is used just to show how bad and exaggerates how lonely she is. Then we're going to zoom in the repetition of lonely. So Steinbeck has done this on purpose just to exaggerate how lonely she is. He gets her to repeat it in the same quote. And then we're going to zoom in on never and nobody. So the never just shows you that she doesn't just get to talk to nobody once a week. It's never ever. She doesn't ever get a chance ever, not once a week, not once a month, never to talk to anybody. And the nobody again just exaggerates that it's not just she can't talk to some people, it's every single person she can't speak to. Okay, there you go. So never ever gets to speak to anyone. And then we're going to talk about 1930s America. To the woman's place was in the home. If they were caught talking to any men apart from people in their family, there would have been questions asked. There you go. So a woman's place, stereotypical woman in the house, cleaning the house, making the dinner for the husband coming home. So my point is, Curly's wife is lonely throughout the novella as none of the other men will speak to her. So remember, your point should be short and simple. We don't want 3 or 4 line points because it gets confusing. Short point because you're going to get your marks in the explanation. Then my quote, which I've talked about already. And then my explanation basically saying why that proves she's lonely. So this quote shows how isolated she is on the ranch full of men. As the other characters do not want to talk to her because they are scared of getting sacked, she's completely alone. The rhetorical question shows she does not understand why they won't talk and explains why she's craving attention from anyone. So again, I've picked out a bit from the quote already there and talked about the fact she's used a question, shows that she doesn't understand why this is happening. Then we're going to zoom in. So let's zoom in on awful first. So the word awful is used like we would use really to emphasise how lonely she is, but the word also shows how sad her life is. So that's another good point. So it's awful as in I'm really lonely, but awful as in her life is awful. Then the repetition of lonely exaggerates to the reader how isolated she feels. Then we're going to zoom in on nobody. So nobody tells the reader she can't talk to anyone on the ranch. Even the boss does not have a wife. And then we're going to zoom in on never. This suggests it's not happened even once. Context: in the 1930s, women had the role of the housewives, and it would have been frowned upon for women to speak to men who are not part of their families. So if you look at that, I haven't gone to town, I haven't done 5 or 6 sentences on one thing. It's all basically 1 or 2 sentences. So my point is 1 sentence. My explanation is 2 sentences. So in my zoom in, I've used 1 sentence on awful. I've used 1 sentence on lonely. And I've used 1 sentence on nobody and never. So here it is all together. So remember, if you would have just done your point, evidence, explain, that would have just been up to the blue. But adding the green, the zoom in, and adding the context in pink is going to move your C grade paragraph hopefully up to a B or an A grade paragraph. So just remember, the perfect PE, point, evidence, explain, then zoom in on one word or two words or three words in the quote, then discuss 1930s American context. So there you go, that's that video sorted. Please go through all the other ones to help you with paragraphs for your controlled assessment. Any problems, drop me an email.